I was involved in the casting process from the very beginning because we had to meet everyone who was part of the North American Registry for the British Actors' Equity, as well as anyone who believed that they could do a passable American accent.
It was incredibly hard to do because James Cameron really kept saying state of the art firepower. They've got to be incredibly sort of on the cutting edge of American military. So what often happens here when American actors come to live in England, they become a bit anglicised and they lose that really sort of aggressive edge, if you like, that this sort of casting required.
I think we probably went through 3,000 people before we could even consider bringing anyone over from the United States. Obviously, Sigourney, because she was reprising her role as Ripley, that was one thing, but anyone beyond that, we had to test or eliminate.
And I worked incredibly hard and found some extraordinary people, like Jeanette Goldstein, who was a weightlifter.
I was very much drawn to the role of Vasquez just because I thought she was so interesting. And Jim said that he normally would have written her as a man, or you would normally make the meanest, the baddest, the man, a 6-foot guy with a huge mustache, but he thought it'd be interesting to make it into a woman.
Well, I was just living in London and doing fringe theater, and just got my British Equity card, and and saw this, and yeah, it really did change my life. It brought, put me in the movies and brought me back to the United States, and started my, my career on television and film.
Right. Somebody said alien. She thought they said illegal alien and signed up.
No, that line in the script was in the script and had nothing to do about how I came. I mean, I just came wrong in that most of the actresses had come, wearing fatigues and army boots, and I came, looking really nice and feminine and with my hair down and lipstick, so.
I lived in England, went there when I was 17 years old, ostensibly just to do a junior abroad program while I was in college, but ended up living there and training as an actor. Oftentimes it takes, quite a few hours to digest all the details of a script, but this was just like a great novel, a page-turner, and I was just wowed. And that's pretty much all I could talk about when I met James Cameron and Gale Ann Hurd was to say, what an amazing script.
Carrie Henn was part of an enormous search to find the character of Newt. Sarah Jackson went everywhere and auditioned kids at schools, and it was difficult, especially to find a little girl who could do anything that would sound like an American accent. Carrie had no acting experience. Her father was stationed at RAF Lakenheath. He was an American, mother's English, and she had never even acted in a school play before.
Well, I was eating lunch, and Sarah Jackson, the casting director, was taking photos of all these young children. And she took my photo, and they had me try out for an audition.
I had never done anything before, never even acted in a school play or anything like that. I just happened to get picked for the job. My parents talked to me and we thought, oh, it's just for an extra part, nothing too big. And they called and asked if I'd like to try out.
We found that the children who had a great deal of acting experience had mostly acted in commercials. And whenever they delivered a line, they'd smile at the end. And it was so inappropriate for this girl who's really suffering from traumatic stress to smile every time she delivered a line. And Carrie had none of that conditioning, so she was perfect.
And they just kept calling me back and calling me back. And they called up and said you had the part, and kind of an interesting story. Not very many people can say that.
I basically rode in on Carrie's coattails. James Cameron had me go in for the audition for the part of the scene that got cut out with us, and I just kind of read, so she had someone to read with, and then later on they just asked me if I would like the part, and who's going to turn down a part in a movie,
It was weeks and weeks of meeting with everyone, and we found quite a few of the cast members in England, and there were just a few that we couldn't find. And that's how we ended up bringing people that we had worked with before over to co-star in the film.
I've seen a lot of the best android characterizations around. I mean, there's been Holmes, and there's been Blade Runner, and there's been, a lot of, there's even been Metropolis, right? All those different shows. And they're hard acts to follow. I mean, all of them are very good, So I had to dump them right away.
I met with Jim on it, and Gail Hurd was there, and I had to audition for it. But I made a connection with that movie, and I really was trying to play myself when I was 12 years old, that emotional life of a 12-year-old, and I come from a slightly abusive childhood, so when adults were like kind of giving me a rough time, I would look at them and say, well, I'm going to outlive you, so I got to have a little pity on you, so I'm not, they didn't get to me that deep because I knew that, and in a lot of ways, Bishop was like that. And I thought, that's what I want to bring to the movie. I always over-prepare, I go through a period when I'm going to do a movie where I call it gathering, and you start going on every impulse, because why do I want to stop any of them? And I went out and had these sclerals made for my eyes that had 2 pupils in each eye. And I remember Jim and I having a lot of conversations on the phone. He was in London already prepping the movie, and he called me once and he said, I'm not sure how to introduce your character. He said, maybe you have the thrumming of the ship and everybody else is in stasis, and maybe this Bishop is just wandering endlessly through the ship. And he called me back a week later and he said, no, you remember that game with the knife between the fingers? I said, what if he did that? That's the intro, you'll know. And so I practiced for a month. I mean, I split the tops of my fingers, learning how to really go fast. And I got every knife you can imagine. I got ones that open, and I got throwing knives and all these knives. So when I got there, I was ready.
I've known Jim for a few years. I actually was his set decorator on a film about 4 years ago. That's how we met. And when he came along to do Terminator, I was doing more acting then. He got me to do a small part in that.
It's hard to audition for people because you have no mystique with them. They know. But I read the script over the 4th of July weekend, and I thought, man, this is great. This is a great part. I remember Jim handed me like a mailing tube for a poster and told me that was my pulse rifle and gave me some direction. I read the scene. Then he gave me some direction. I read the scene again, and then that was it. And I left thinking I'd probably overdone it. I'd probably overacted, and I'd probably never hear from him. And kind of bummed me out. I mean, I thought I was right for the part. And then I got back to California. Weird Science came out, and I got a call from Hildy Gottlieb, my agent at the time, and she says, what do you call a ball that's out? And I go, left field? She goes, yeah, left field. Well, Jim Cameron's going to be calling you in 5 minutes from London. He's just cast you to play Hudson in Aliens. And I couldn't believe it. I remember right where I was in my kitchen in my apartment in Venice. And I think when I hung up the phone, I think everybody in Venice knew I'd gotten the part. And then Jim called me. I guess it was about 10 o'clock at night there. And he said, hey, I'm really excited. And I just didn't want to say anything so that he would change his mind. And 2 weeks later, I was on my way to London.
This was a tremendous role for Bill, and I think one of the most memorable in the film. We wanted to make sure that the Colonial Marines in the film operated like a real unit. That's the kind of thing that you can't just fake.
Jim Cameron got together these special forces guys that not only trained us rigorously in maneuvers, so we looked like soldiers, but we did it as a team too.
We had a great camaraderie with all the guys, the soldiers, the grunts. It was fantastic. And when we got together, we got 2 weeks before we started to shoot, which is unusual, to hang out and to train and get to know each other.
They were all bonding together to make them seem more like a group, the Marines. And I was the young one, kind of the offcast, but I just joined in everything that they did. They used to run around the studios, and they'd have the guns underneath their arm, and they'd be running along. And I wanted to be involved, so I'd grab my Cabbage Patch Kid, and I'd run behind them. And I really just wanted to be kind of a part of the whole set, and they really made me feel like I was a part of it.
Al Matthews was actually, I believe, experienced in the military, and he was terrific. But we hired people who trained the entire team as a unit, and it was pretty grueling. It was physical. They went through maneuvers, they went through drills, and Al was their sergeant. And because he had experience actually in the military, he was pretty believable, and I think relished the role.
I would like to think that I was hired because I do my job as an actor. But reality is that because of my military experience, I'm also here. And I think we've done a good job, but we've got a lot of actors here who've, never seen a weapon before in their life. And they're handling it well. I mean, I have to put the boot in every now and then, but that's how it goes.
We had an actual physical fitness routine for them from 8:30 in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. And they were running, weightlifting, calisthenics.
Run us through drills and teach us how to salute and all of that kind of stuff, and to march with all this heavy equipment.
And so we ran around the sculptured gardens at Pinewood, very incongruous, all these sort of lovely little hedges and things were going, woo, 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 It was really kind of silly, but it was good. It was really good. And the salting stairwells.
We did deployment exercises and stuff like that, and we beat up this equipment pretty good. We did it for a few weeks.
We learned about how to cover people and how to, just so you knew what you were doing, and it looked like you knew what you were doing, soldiering instead of acting soldiering.
The emotional feelings that they are transmitting all the time. We found that it came over very strongly after a couple of weeks.
For the week we spent with each other, 10 days, we ate together and hung out and we worked, and we got to know everyone, joking around with people. Yeah, and it did. You began to feel like you were together in a unit. And now as the film's gone on, I feel like I'm, I know all of them.
Sigourney at that time was on Half Moon Street, and they were running behind in schedule. And the whole problem was that I think there was 4 weeks gap between the finish of one and the start of the other, and they were falling more and more behind, and they had promised Sigourney 2 weeks off.
I was really intimidated to meet Sigourney Weaver. Sigourney Weaver from Alien, and she'd gone on to do other things in the interim and become a huge star. And she was really disarming and really friendly and easy to talk to. And it was so nice to me that I always thought I must be screwing up because she was so overly nice. But that's who she is, and she really was the leader of the cast. It was a big ensemble with her in the lead.
Maybe it was a good thing that I wasn't there because all the soldiers were bonding and figuring out, experimenting with who they were and what their armor looked like and all that stuff. And it's good, I think, that Ripley isn't one of them. And there's sort of distrust on both sides. But it was weird to come in that late. I literally finished one movie and started the other 3 days later.
It was good that we were together first, and Sigourney and Ripley come in later when we're all a unit, and she's the outsider, and it was perfect. And the same thing with Burke and Gorman. It just worked out that way. So it was easy that way because they were outsiders coming in.
I was doing a job before that, and I couldn't actually get in for a lot of the training. But I did, work out with weights and did some of the training with them. Yeah, but I've done a fair bits and pieces of militaristic stuff before.
It's been a lot of fun because I am an outsider, and just conspicuously it works physically because these, as I say, these guys are all in their military gear, and I'm a guy with a pencil. So I look at them and I look blazingly inappropriate. And someone told me that the other day, someone asked them why I had been here so long and hadn't worked yet, because they were just walking by the set and they saw everybody in their uniform, and here was I wearing a flannel shirt and a vest. And they said, and not only that, but why is he standing in the shot? He's holding up everything.
Jim was very open in allowing us to develop our characters. I mean, we had a couple of days where we actually did all the dressing of our weapons and painted our little, idiosyncratic bits of stuff on. I mean, I think my gun in the background here, I called it my bitch. I mean, all the stuff, the bones hanging off my hat. Jim had a bunch of stuff on a table, not put together in any specific way, and he just said, have at it, guys. And he left us for 4 or 5 hours, and we had a ball.
I put my girlfriend's name on there. It was Louise. And then I think I had kind of like some kind of a Japanese kind of a love knot. And actually, I didn't paint that stuff on. I kind of drew it, and then Terry English, the armor, had all the stuff laid on and painted on. I think I had something on the back that said something like dispose of properly, or one of those do not rupture, contents under pressure. You know, we had a lot of in jokes like that.
We were encouraged to personalize it, and our lockers, in the shot where we're all suiting up, everybody dressed their lockers. You could see that, you know, it says adios on the gun. Oh, then it says on my breastplate, it says el riesgo siempre vive, which is a line from a poem that it was a book of Chicana poetry, which means the risk always lives.
Then we were running around being fitted with this armor that was all custom made for us. And I remember Jim had me all suited up in the armor, and he wanted to see just how rugged, how durable it was. So he said, why don't you run down that hallway and just slide into that wall? Okay, Jim. So I ran and slid into the wall. All this stuff broke and came off of me, and he said, this stuff's not ready to go. And so he said to the armors, you got to make this stuff stronger.